Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 83 of Alva's Rings and Nerdy Things. I'm one half of your co-host, Sean, here with my other co-host, Sam, and we are in the midst of House of the Dragon Season 2. Sam, how are you?
Doing well. Things are going well here. How are you?
I am struggling to get the rear wiper blade onto my car. That is currently what I'm dealing with. But I'm hoping YouTube will enlighten my journey in replacing my windshield wiper. So, update next week.
Here we go. Stay tuned for windshield wiper.
Wipergate 2024.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, we watched episode 2 of season 2 of House of the Dragon. I believe this episode is called Rhaenyra the Cruel, picking up in the aftermath of the assassination of Jaehaerys, the young prince. Episode 2 summary right here. Prince Jaehaerys' murder causes chaos. King Aegon hastily assembles his small council, wanting revenge on Rhaenyra. Sir Otto suggests a public funeral to tarnish Rhaenyra's image. In the procession, a herald chants Rhaenyra the Cruel as Alicent and Helaena receive the people's condolences. City Watch Guard Blood is captured. He confesses to Lord Larys that Daemon hired him and his accomplice, an unknown to him Ratcatcher. Dragonstone, Rhaenyra worries her popularity will suffer. Suspecting Daemon ordered Jaehaerys' death if Aemon were absent, Rhaenyra says she no longer trusts him. Daemon then flies to Harrenhal to recruit alliances. Having escaped assassination, Aemon, remorseful over Lucerys' death, seeks solace at a brothel. Sir Criston orders Sir Arryk to kill Rhaenyra by infiltrating Dragonstone, disguised as his twin, Erryk. Rhaenyra grants Mysaria freedom. While departing Dragonstone, Mysaria notices Arryk arriving and rushes back to the castle. When Arryk later enters Rhaenyra's chambers, Erryk bursts in and kills his brother. Overcome with grief, he commits suicide. Aegon publicly hangs all Ratcatchers, including Cheese, infuriating Otto, who fears a populist revolt. Aegon dismisses Otto as Hand of the King and appoints Sir Criston. And we should add to that Sir Criston and Alicent end the episode in an intimate encounter.
Before we get into the notes that we really wanted to talk about, I have to touch on bad accents. What's her name? Mysera?
Yeah, I'm glad that you did that because I added that one spot to the outline, but yeah, take it away.
That's not even her bad accent isn't even what I want to talk about, but it was a meaningless scene of her recognizing the twin and then going back when she had no interactions with him to let anybody know that the twin was there. Like, she sees him, she gets suspicious, turns around and goes back. The other twin kind of gets a vibe or this twin sense or whatever that his brother is near him. And then their action plays out. And then she never has any kind of interaction with anybody in Dragonstone to be like, hey, we should sound the alarm. There's a person infiltrating. Did you notice anything that came from her recognition that someone was sneaking in?
No, she obviously recognizes Arryk and puts it together that, oh, wait a second, I saw Erryk earlier in the castle and he didn't come down. So that's definitely not him. And that probably means nefarious activity, right? She's a spy master. So I get it. She's going to jump to what in this case is the correct conclusion. But yeah, we don't see her running back to the castle. Also, how did she find, I think this is probably your point, how did she find Erryk and only Erryk, right? There was no, like you said, there's no yelling of, intruder, assassin, alarm, right? It's just all of a sudden Erryk bursts into the room after Arryk already enters. So yeah, they're she wouldn't have just immediately found him and then he immediately got into her room, right?
Yeah, no. So the assassin twin, Arryk, right?
Yeah.
Arryk he goes into the room. Before that, we see Erryk walk over and switch out places with the other guard because he wants to be the one to confront his brother. So she never interacts with them at all, is my point. I
thought it was Arryk, the assassin who replaced Sir Marbrand, and that's how he was able to gain access to the room. because
No,
he was
not from
standing
my
guard.
understanding. That's not how I interpreted that
Oh,
event. Because we had whatever Eric, Dragonstone Eric, is like realizing something's going on. Arik is also stealthing around, making sure his brother doesn't see him. And then you have Eric, Dragonstone Eric, relieve the brother to then be the one to go in, or to relieve the other guard to then go in and confront the brother. Because I think he knows his brother's there. And we never see what's her name interact with anybody to be
yeah,
like, we should maybe we should get both brothers, because at least stop someone. Like, it just didn't make any sense to me.
I I think we have different interpretations of what we saw, primarily because there is literally no way to tell Eric and Arik apart, and it was very frustrating. And I get that's the point of that whole thing, is they look so alike that Arik could infiltrate the castle, and then when they're fighting, you can't tell who's who. So when one of them stabs the other, they're like, there's a look of like, okay, wait a second, is he now going to try to kill me, or whatever? And then when he commits suicide, it confirms that it was Rhaenyra's Kingsguard or Queensguard who won that fight. But I think it's confusing because you don't actually see Mysaria warn anybody, and there is no alarm that's raised. It's just one Kingsguard bursts into when Queensguard bursts into the room to protect the queen and fight his brother. And yet, to your point, it could also be this twin sense thing where, because he had that one, there was that one scene where he was walking and then he turned around as if something caught his attention, which is like implies that he's now suspicious. So then and why was he walking around to begin with? I think it would have been helpful if there had been some sort of like establishing thing that, oh, Eric, Rhaenyra's Queensguard, is patrolling the castle at night, and that's why he's walking around, and that's how he's in a position to like burst in. Because otherwise, Mysaria, theoretically, either Eric has incredible twin sense and knows when Rhaenyra is in danger, or Mysaria was able to find him and he was able to make it into Rhaenyra's chambers, and neither of them then raised an actual alarm to get some of the rest of the armed men in that castle to go and protect Rhaenyra. But I think
It was dumb. I hated it.
Are you being facetious, or are you serious with that?
No, I'm serious. I thought that the way they handled that whole scenario was imbecilic. I thought it was really, really dumb. I'm trying to look for a different word other than dumb or stupid.
I like
but
imbecilic.
I just didn't. The whole time I was watching it, I was like, I know what they're trying to do to get you to confuse the two twins. You don't know which one is going to be victorious. But that's not even what frustrated me. It was, why even show us Mysaria recognizing that someone is infiltrating the tower when everybody knows that those two are twins? And then not make it clear at all that there's an alarm being raised that someone is trying to infiltrate Dragonstone. Like, it didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, also, I know what they wanted to do was have Rhaenyra grant Mysaria her freedom in a way that just showed Rhaenyra, is going to basically uphold the honor of her house. And that was kind of what it was. She's like, I'll let you go because, basically because Daemon said he would do it. And I didn't know that he said that, but I trust you that he said that, and I trust him to have said that, so I'm going to let you go. But it would also have been effective if Mysaria was still like, they could say, well, we're not going to let you go, but we'll give you freedom of the castle. And so she's like walking around the castle and she sees Arik infiltrating, and then she goes and notifies somebody. And then that's how she demonstrates to Rhaenyra that she's loyal and trustworthy. And Rhaenyra says, okay, I grant you freedom. You may stay here if you like, or you can leave. And they didn't even need to have her like walking down alone to catch a boat. Either way, the thing that got me, that I would describe as imbecilic, is when Arik infiltrates the room, he stops when Eric opens the door, but there's enough, like the distance between Arik and Eric is longer than the distance between Arik and Rhaenyra, and he's already drawn his sword. So he could just finish walking over there and stab her before Eric is able to get to him. right? But instead he turns around and like then they have their face off and then they start fighting. When if Arik had just finished walking across the room, he could have assassinated Rhaenyra, and then he would have died. But at that point, he's going to die anyway, or he's at least going to get into a fight anyway. So that's what kind of got me about it. But
dumb for different reasons.
He is a little dumb.
Next up, what caused Arik to be there in the first place is the complete, what's the term?
Turn to the dark side.
Well, yeah, turn to the dark side, the complete moral destruction of Criston Cole. And my argument for wanting to talk about him in this is if Rhaenyra damaged his moral fiber, Alicent straight up destroyed it. Like, to me, and we talked about a little bit about it last week, like Criston Cole to me is the biggest villain of the series now. Because you have him, he feels guilty about his role in the assassination of the heir. And he was kind of shirking his duties to...
I was abed, Your Grace.
Yes.
Yeah, you were. Banging your mom.
Yeah. So he feels guilty about that. And he has the moment where he's had many opportunities to kind of turn it around and become a better person and kind of go back to his honor, but he never chooses that. And then this time, I think he kind of has that moment where Alicent's bathing and he's watching guard. And then she says something about absolution. And then he says, there's no absolution for what I've done. So I think in that moment when he's standing out there just to himself thinking, he finally has the moment of, there's no way for me to get my honor back. So I'm just going to go full into self-preservation, what's best for me. And then, he blames somebody else for the death or the assassination of the heir, which is unfortunately Arik, who had a perfectly good excuse, like being with the king.
It was
he was guarding the king. Like, where'd you want him to be? Like,
and it was, I mean, you could see what was happening as soon as he like came in and said something about, oh, your cloak is dirty. Right. And he's like, the cloak represents purity and fidelity. I was like, oh, okay. Like, it's funny that you chose those two things, Mr. Like banging multiple members of the royal family and murdering people, neglecting your duties, potentially leading to the assassination of the heir. And then he, one real quick thing, he also talks about like the ancient honor of our brotherhood or something like that, referring to the Kingsguard. I was like, the Kingsguard's been around for less than 100 years. Like, it's not that ancient. Like the Night's Watch is thousands of years old. The Order of Maesters is thousands of years old. Like the Kingsguard is a relatively new thing. And granted, it's pretty elite, but it's not ancient honor. But then his whole, like, he just kept like grasping for straws basically and like looking for the leverage to get Sir Arik to go and kill Rhaenyra. And it was like, where were you? I was guarding the king. Like, you didn't think you couldn't do that in the king's chambers? I was like, first of all, the king and Helena do not occupy the same chambers. Like, I think it's very clear that they don't live in the same, they barely even talk to each other. And then he's like, you didn't think to go check the royal apartments? Is like, oh, and abandon the king to go look at the apartments for no fucking reason. And then Arik had a perfectly good point, which is why didn't the queen have a sworn protector? It's like Rhaenyra, when she was the princess, had a sworn protector. The queen, Alicent, when she was queen to Viserys, she had a sworn protector. It was Criston Cole.
He's done. There's nothing left for him.
What do you foresee him doing? Where do you see this? Is he going to murder the younglings?
Well, no, the trailer makes it out that he ends up being like a dragon rider. At least that's the vibe that I got from one of the scenes. It looked like he was on Dragonback, whether that's he's riding with somebody or...
I don't recall that from the trailer. He's definitely on horseback. I think he's like leading a cavalry charge.
Maybe it's horseback, yeah.
Yeah.
With the cut-ins with people on dragons, it's easy to get those mixed up. But
yeah,
I don't know. I hope he dies. He's one of the few that I'm like, I hope it's gruesome. I hope it's...
I was thinking to myself last night that we don't really there aren't a ton of people that we can really root for in this. And I don't actually think that, but they're, as opposed to Game of Thrones, where it's like pretty early on, it's like, oh, the Starks are the good guys, the Lannisters are the bad guys, and then that slowly kind of changes as we get to know more about Tyrion, and we get to know more about Jaime, and Cersei's always kind of terrible, and Joffrey's also obviously terrible, but like we never have much reason to think the Starks are anything other than honorable. And it's just like, oh, they're so honorable, that's kind of their flaw. That was Ned's flaw, that was Rob's flaw. Here, it's like every character is so, I don't want to say, every character is such a mix of flaws and strengths that there's no, they're all shades of gray. Some people shade to the darker side, like Sir Cole, Larys.
I think Kristen Cole is now all bad, man.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, he's all bad. But Daemon is kind of getting worse in a lot of ways.
Daemon's always been worse. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, and that's the kind of thing I was reflecting on it, and I was like, wait a second, when was Daemon ever that good?
No, he's never been. He's always been
really
about self-preservation, about him trying to get power. He's killed a wife. He may have really cared for his last wife, who died during childbirth. But even then, like deciding to go to stay in Essos and like all of that was all about him. Yeah.
And then that scene with when he's storming out of his confrontation with Rhaenyra, which we should talk about specifically, but he like walks right by his daughter, who says to him, "Father," and then he ignores her completely and walks away. It's like, that was, man. And you had that scene with him and Rhaenys in episode 1 where she brings up Laena. It's like, yeah, in retrospect, it was, can we blame him for that too? Like, just all of he gets worse with age.
Let's focus on Rhaenyra and Daemon's scene.
Yeah, I love this scene. I thought the dialogue was great. I thought the acting was great. The direction and the camera work specifically was interesting. And I mentioned something during my watch with Haley, and she's like, yeah, it's like a stage play in a lot of ways. That was my overall take. We can get into some of the specifics, but what did you think of that scene?
That was a good scene. I mean, I don't have much to go off. I just remember thinking that the cinematography was good for the entire episode, not just the scene in particular, but the entire show this season has been great camera work. I guess my takeaway from the Rhaenyra versus Daemon is good. I'm happy she's realized she can't trust him. Maybe now she'll be smart enough to just use him for war, like when she needs him for battles. But then she kind of hints that maybe she should be wary that once Aegon is gone, what's to stop Daemon from accidentally killing Rhaenyra and then being the only claimant to the throne? And then,
so it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because this is something that is not really implied. I don't think the book talks about this at all. The potential for Daemon to kind of turn on Rhaenyra, but you get a sense of it. I mean, Rhaenyra outright states that in their
accuses
argument.
Him.
Yeah. And then you have Rhaenys kind of talking about that. Rhaenys and Corlys at the end of the episode, they're kind of bringing it back up, which is interesting, because in the book there is this, Daemon also goes to Harrenhal, as they're saying he's doing in the show, and he and Rhaenyra don't really meet up again. I don't believe they meet up at all for the rest of the war. And so I kind of like what the show is doing here, where it's going to isolate Rhaenyra. It's going to kind of throw Daemon into something of his own corner. And I kind of like what you're talking about too. Like, Rhaenyra will use him as a war leader, because that seems to be what he cares about. She said that. It's like, you only see greatness through bloodshed. Or maybe that's what he kind of states his value is: greatness through bloodshed. And then Rhaenyra's like, you're pathetic. But that doesn't mean he's not without a use. But I just love that scene. Next
up is Otto versus Aegon.
Yeah, so I think these two scenes are kind of mirrors of each other in a lot of ways. You've got this confrontation. I thought that the cinematography was similar, and you had the camera kind of following people around and moving around the room and shifting from one person to another. The dialogue in each scene was fantastic. I love all of the little insults that Otto uses. It's like going through his entire thesaurus of insults, which is fantastic. The only thing that disappointed me was that we didn't get the phrase "mummer's farce" to describe the plot to go assassinate Rhaenyra. That's a common George R. R. Martin phrase that I think would have been appropriate here. But yeah, Otto is great in this scene, and I really like how they mirrored each other, this scene and the Daemon Rhaenyra confrontation. And you can just get that sense of this kind of tired resignation when Otto is going to leave the room and Aegon tells him to stop and take off the hand of the kingpin. He's like, you can see he already realizes, like, yes, this is happening. And then he says, like, you wouldn't dare, but he already kind of knows it's a foregone conclusion. That's what I took from.
Yeah, and just the look of defeat.
Yeah.
And to me, it's poetic justice of, now you're talking so highly of Viserys after you used him basically the entire time, that now you have a strong-willed individual who's not going to take your shit. And I just think your chickens have come home to roost, Otto.
Yeah.
Like, this is what you get. Like, you've been trying to strong hand a king for 30 years, however long it's been. And now you have a king that doesn't want to put up with your shit and is seeing what you did to the last two kings, basically. And yeah, so I don't know.
And I mean, they set it up really well in the first episode with Laris kind of pulling Aegon aside and being like, Otto, he was really Viserys's hand. You don't want to be viewed like Viserys was, do you? And then, but obviously it also fits Aegon's kind of natural intentions. He wants revenge. He wants fire and blood. And Otto is trying to rein him in. He doesn't want to put up with it. I have to say, if I were in Aegon's position, I would have been on Dragonback immediately and going and getting some revenge. But I think the portrayal of Aegon as kind of going back and forth between this fiery temper and this kind of deep sadness is very understandable, but it also creates this bad king, right? What was the confrontation ignited by? The fact that he hung all of the rat catchers in public. And it like completely destroyed the whatever goodwill existed among the small folk. And I think it was a little much that the plot summary that we got said that Otto fears a populist revolt. I think Otto is just more worried about, I don't think he's thinking full on revolt. I'm thinking more just like the goodwill of the small folk and the respect of the major houses. Because like this is the other thing about this episode is like you see so quickly Otto changes from like the shock and horror of the assassination to how can we use this politically. He's like, I don't want I think it's his great grandson, not his grandson. I don't want him to have died in vain. So let's spread the word as wide as possible and get all these houses back on our side. And he's pissed now that effort has gone in the opposite way because of Aegon's cruelty.
Next brother is Aemond. He had a very weird scene where he was naked laying in the lap of a harlot. Is that a polite term to use?
Yes, we can call her a madam. I think that was the subtitles gave her that title. So she
seemed like she was running the brothel or wherever he was.
Yeah. And this was the same woman who answered the door and was talking to Aemond and Kristen Cole in season 1 when they were looking for Aegon, correct?
Yeah.
And it's implied too that I think she may have been his first partner on his birthday. But it's a very strange scene. One, because he's very weirdly skinny and you can see his muscles, but he also doesn't seem like he's very muscular. So, and I
thought he was very skinny and looked pretty muscular for how skinny he was.
You could see his muscles. That's because I think he's just like really low body fat. Like we could get into the whole bodybuilding, whatever, gym bro aspect of this, but he looked like Voldemort in the Deathly Hallows, the little Voldemort baby underneath the bench in the train station.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was kind of intentional. Like I think they were intending him to be in a fetal position, showing him as this vulnerable child. in a lot of ways, because that was the sense that you get, right? She's the Madame Sylvie, I think is her name, was acting very maternal toward him. And I think they even poured like hot milk into that cup.
Potentially,
It
it's a
looked like,
Homelander.
is that,
If
I
you're a
don't watch
fan
The
of the
Boys.
if you're a fan of the boys, yeah, it's a Homelander move. I don't the summary of the episode says that he's feeling guilty about Lucerys, which I think is part of it, but I think he's
Mm-hmm.
also feeling very guilty about not being in his room
Mm-hmm.
when the assassins came. And to me, that's more what he probably feels guilty about,
Yeah.
because that's what he's talking about to the madam.
Yeah. He's like, what
Laying
did he
in her
say? Like,
lap.
they were coming for me,
They
but I
came for
was,
me.
yeah, but I was with you. Like and so it's like, he obviously is seeking her out for solace, maybe originally over Lucerys's death, and now kind of this like mounting guilt and grief that he's feeling. But I wonder if it's just kind of generally. He also talks about how they made fun of him, the Lucerys, and it's implied, Jacaerys and maybe others as well, because he was different. And you kind of get the sense that he is looking for that maternal comfort because he's different, maybe because he didn't get it from Alicent in the way that he wanted it, or it's just kind of he needs it to sustain himself. But I thought it was a weird scene, but it was good. It helped flesh out his character a little bit from just this kind of one-eyed villain type.
And
Oh,
now we're going to wrap up. Oh,
one
okay.
final thing, just a stray observation: the dancers at the beginning of the brothel scene, very prominent. That the lead dancer had Targaryen-ish silver blonde platinum hair.
Maybe we got some bastards in the brothel.
We might.
Okay.
Okay.
We know Aegon frequented it.
Well, and now
Daemon.
I'm thinking, and yeah, remember Daemon, because it's Daemon and Viserys have that conversation where he's like, we, fucked our way through all the whorehouses in King's Landing when we were young. So maybe, yeah. Anyway, you were moving us along.
Yes, we're going to wrap up the episode with Sam's prop watch.
Prop watch 2024. So Model City RIP. Viserys' model city is smashed in Aegon's rage and grief following the death of the murder of his son. And then the confrontation scene with Sir Otto and Aegon takes place in that same room, and the model city is completely gone. And it really opened up that room. A lot of empty space now.
Yeah, there's nothing but smashed sandstone. All look like sandstone miniatures or whatever they were.
Something. It must have, yeah, I can't tell for sure, but that's probably sitting in some Hollywood storage facility somewhere, or maybe it'll go on auction in a few years.
And next up, you want to talk about cups.
Yeah, there were two prominent cup smashings in the council chamber. Aegon like very violently threw his cup against the wall and it shattered. And then in Daemon and Rhaenyra's confrontation, he's sitting down at the table drinking to begin the conversation. And then when he gets angry right before he stands up, he actually does a double smash where he smashes the cup in one direction, and then with the backstroke as he's rising, he smashes what is a vase of flowers. So it's great when they have props. It's even more fun when they destroy them on camera.
And do they destroy your candelabras?
No, the candelabras remain intact. The thing that I noticed is that there is a chair in Dragonstone in Rhaenyra's chambers. I think it's in Rhaenyra's chambers, and the back of the chair is carved identically to the candelabras in the Red Keep, and it's this like kind of dragon scale, dragon body motif. That's why I really like the continuity in the Targaryen interior decorating. Kudos.
And that's all we have for episode 83, everybody. I hope you enjoyed Sam's prop watch. We will do it again next week. My forecast of the next person to die hasn't happened yet because no one of consequence really died in the last episode.
Yeah.
I believe I had it down to Otto and Daemon. Were those my two?
I'm gonna have to re-listen to the episode.
Yeah, we'll have to listen to. Currently, yeah, but I know Otto for sure was on my list of to die. But yeah, you never know with this show. Someone plays a prominent role, and then the next scene they're being decapitated. So who knows. Thank you for listening, everybody. You can follow us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We have a Facebook group called Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things Podcast. You can listen to this show on pretty much every podcasting platform you can find. You can send us emails at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. And that is it for me.
Tune in next week. We'll see you then. In the meantime, have a good one. Bye, everybody.